there was this invention that kind of changed the relationship that humans have with information, and it was the smartphone. And now it's changing again because our relationship is changing yet for another time. Google made the information accessible like in 2000, and then the smartphone made the information accessible and convenient. Now is that AI is making the information customized. Today, I'm going to type in a much more precise search string or prompt. Consumers actually trust that output because it feels customized. It feels specific to them. And it also oftentimes is not accurate because of where that data is being pulled. We have those humans train AI to listen to those phone calls. And we find that, first of all, 25 out of 100 calls during business hours simply just go unanswered. There are tools that are coming out that answer those calls for you and help schedule an exam, which drives revenue, reduces cost, and improves the patient experience.
The essence of strategy is choosing what not to do. A quote by Michael Porter. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Nerdy Optometrist, a podcast channel for all things eye care. And this is your host, Ukti Vora. Before we dive into another amazing episode, don't forget to follow my channel and catch all the episodes on your favorite platform. Today, we have a growth strategist who's going to tell us what not to do throughout this episode. So, let's just dive into it with a quick introduction. Eugene Shatsman is a known personality within the eye care industry. If you're looking for growth, strategy, business ideas, I'm sure you would have interacted with him at some point of your life. He is the managing partner of National Strategic Group. As a sought after speaker on business strategy, consumer behavior, marketing, and leadership. He's a well known for using cutting edge strategies paired with industry specific research and data to drive meaningful results. Eugene leverages the collective intelligence of over 100 plus subject matter experts who comprise National Strategic Business Strategy and Marketing Powerhouse. He actually is providing you the powerhouse that you need to accelerate your business and growth. Not only does NSG constantly optimize and test digital strategies, but their team also have the latest research and best practices in consumer behavior. Market demands search engine optimization, website, social media, email marketing, and all that you can think about. So, with that, we are going to dive into what business growth strategy looks like and how did it all started. A very warm welcome, Eugene, and it's a pleasure to have you on the episode.
Thanks so much, Ukti, and excited to be here.
So you are not an optometrist, and it's always my favorite question to know how did you bump into eye care and how did it all start?
Well, I'll back up. So I started National Strategic at a time where everybody thought it was the worst time to start a business, which was the recession of 2008, 2009. And what I actually saw was this opportunity that everybody was pulling out of marketing, which left this giant void because it's not like consumers are like not watching TV or not using their devices or internet or whatever. And at the time, I was like, man, there is something really interesting happening with the relationship that humans have with information. And there's also something really interesting happening where marketing is cheap at that particular moment. Share of voice becomes super cheap. And yes, it's difficult to convince a business owner to go spend money on marketing at a time where, a recession is happening. But for those that would do it, they could capture a disproportionate share of voice if they were to invest in resources. But the whole idea, if they were to invest in marketing, but the whole idea for me was, well, like, but you have to have enough data to make sure that it's ROI positive, that you can't just blindly go spend money on marketing. So I was one of the first data driven marketers in the professional industry because the whole idea was like you can't just do activity, you got to make sure that that money comes back to you if you're marketing in a recession. And that's really kind of how I built the organization that's today National Strategic Group with over 200 people who are in that particular organization.
That's fantastic. And how did eye care happen? How did you bump into it? Because you, I believe, based on how you started, it was just focusing on professionals, not just eye care practitioners. And now you are, I think that's your specialty. To tell me more about.
That's true. Yeah. So in the beginning, it was kind of like anybody who I thought we could do a good job for, which, we did focus a lot on professional businesses, but it was like anybody who had money who could potentially pay us that money, we thought we could do a good job. But what I realized over time is that the more, in order to be the best advisor, the most valuable resource to your client, you can't just be an expert in what you do, right? Like I can't just be an expert in marketing. I have to be an expert in what the client does. And quite frankly, if we're doing work in the aesthetics industry and in the behavioral health industry, and we're doing work in the vision industry, it's just too much to keep track of to know exactly how each client manages their business. And so, at one point, we had to choose. Right, we had clients in multiple categories, and at one point, we had to say, where do we need to specialize? Because I had to train a team of people to be experts, not just in marketing, but also in the business that our clients had. And I really, they tried riding the rail and try to say, okay, maybe we can be experts in everything. But truly, if you want to be the best and the most valued advisor to your clients, you have to know their business, in some cases, better than they know their business. And so that's where we decided we need to specialize in something. And so we studied which consumers do we understand the best, which businesses do we understand the best, and where is there the most opportunity. And one of the things that kind of became really, really obvious is that, an annual eye exam is something so necessary for every consumer, right? We can all agree on that. And yet there's this giant gap of information that exists where a consumer's like, well, I don't feel like my prescription changed, or like I want to maybe buy my glasses online. And so early on, I was like, man, we as an industry are not doing a great job of communicating the value of that to the consumer. And the consumer doesn't understand the value. Right, and so it was like, there's a chance to really make a difference and to change the way that the consumer sees their relationship with an eye care provider, and there's also this really, really interesting information shift that was happening right around that time, where consumers' relationship with information was changing, that I thought, okay, well, this is a great time to become to really help make the mark in that particular industry. So that's where, over the years, we've specialized to where we only focus on vision. If you do other things, we can recommend a different strategic partner for you. But our organization is the only organization in our space that truly focuses on vision and eye care practices.
I think that's great because, as you mentioned, right, everybody needs an annual eye exam, and yet we fail to get one unless it's like end of the year and you're trying to just use your insurance, but you don't really do it as needed. And the other thing I feel like when I was in optometry school, I was always being told like optometry or eye care is a recession proof industry because everybody at some point, whether it's your kid for myopia nowadays, or presbyopia kicks in, or you get cataract at some point, you at least see an eye doctor once in your lifetime. That is like a non-negotiable kind of the journey a patient has to go through throughout their life. So I definitely feel like, being in this space, you definitely are recession proof, or you will always see more and more patients if you do it right. And yet, I think there's still a lot of scope in general, even though I feel we've come a long way. And I'll let you talk about that on how we can have a presence, more understanding with the patients and providing them more insights of how important eye care is. It doesn't have to be a problem that brings you to see an eye doctor. So over these years, you said you started around 2008-ish. So over these 17 years of your experience that you have, tell me about the shift, like, since you started your focusing growth strategy and marketing in vision. How has things shifted from where you started, and what are you seeing? What are you hearing now?
Well, and it's interesting because I think you bring up two really interesting points, and I'll try to address the second one later about being recession proof as an industry. But when you think about 2009, and you're right, it's like 2008, 2009, 17 years ago. What else happened 17 years ago is there was this invention that kind of changed the relationship that humans have with information, and it was the smartphone, right? It was like the first Apple iPhone and the first Samsung counterpart kind of hit the market, and people started actually adopting that technology. And over the next 4 or 5 years, people started using those smartphones and pairing them with Google search, which was also something that was like relatively novel, 25 years ago, right? And then you start thinking about, we used to have conversations, or we had like yellow pages that we would be like business directories. And now all of a sudden the world's information was in the palm of our hands. And so how consumers really consumed information and reacted to the various stimuli completely changed over the course of my career. And now it's changing again, which is so exciting to watch how it's changing again, because our relationship is changing yet for another time. Because all that information, if you think about what the smartphone did, is it made the information accessible and convenient, right?
Yeah.
Well, actually, Google made the information accessible like in 2000, and then the smartphone made the information accessible and convenient in 2007 through 2010 when it started getting adopted. And then what we think about now is that AI is making the information customized. So I no longer have to consume the same information that you have to consume, because in the past, like if you think about it, like if I Googled how do you treat dry eye, right? I would get an article, and then I would sort of consume that article, and I would say, well, that's not quite for me, or that's not quite a thing. And then I'd go click the back button, and I'd go consume the next article, and then I'd go whatever. And today I'm going to type in a much more precise search string or prompt, right, into whatever I'm using, whether it's Google, whether it's Gemini, whether it's ChatGPT, whatever, and that thing is going to surface a much more, what feels like a much more customized output for me. And so this is how information, the relationship with information is shifting today. And where in optometry, it's really exciting to be on the front lines of this, because it's kind of a there's a dichotomy. On one end, you want the consumer to be super educated. On the other end, the consumer is trusting that technology to provide valuable information. But like, just because that thing can provide me with information that can, I don't know, help me fix my computer when it doesn't, when the webcam doesn't work, maybe, and it will provide very reliable information, right? If I do a search prompt into Google right now, I don't have to visit any websites in order to fix my webcam if my webcam isn't turning on during a meeting. And it's really reliable, very, very helpful, and I don't and it's super useful. The truth is that's also happening with a lot of medical information, and even some prompts that are like, who's the best eye doctor in my area, right? Those are prompts that are happening today, and consumers actually trust that output because it feels customized, it feels specific to them, and it also oftentimes is not accurate
Mm.
because of where that data is being pulled. So again, it's an exciting time to be on the front lines of this, because I think we can watch both technology and consumer behavior shape and shift, and we can actually influence it ourselves, and also our clients get a chance to influence it, and we get to run all kinds of experiments to see what's working, what's not working.
Yeah, and I think you did bring up my next focus in or question about AI and all the digital tools and technology that's coming up, that we are all trying to adopt and kind of ride the wave. I want to know, like, when you talk about, say, AI tools like ChatGPT, Gemini, whichever when you talk about marketing or research and things, it feels very trivial because, I mean, I might be using it just to say, Google how to fix your camera and things. But from a practitioner standpoint, how do you stand out and be part of that search, right? Because you don't know where to start. You don't know if you're coming up. You don't know what's being seen. Because earlier, as you said, like, you would Google something and you would have 10 articles or 15 articles to go through. And there was an opportunity for someone to find you. Now, it is so customized and it's so precise that your name as a practice owner, as a doctor, might not even come up. If I write I'm the best doctor in the Bay Area and I've written it like 15 times on my website, maybe ChatGPT would pick that up and show it, but I might just have like 5 years of experience versus you who would have say 17, right? So how does these things like influence, and what do you need to do as a practitioner to be at the top of the game with all the
Yeah.
technology around?
Well, and it's true, because I think the reality is that consumers are still using, and predominantly Google at this point, to find local businesses, and specifically local healthcare providers. Over we have the data that in at least 2025, over 80% of all of the local research for which provider should I use, happens on Google still. But so you can influence those things, and there's actually I'll give you the whole formula, or I guess I'll give you the biggest pillars of that formula that ultimately help influence that. Number one is that you have to pay attention to what I call the snack pack listing. Actually, Google calls it the snack pack. I just sort of stole it 10 years ago because some Google engineers referred to it as the snack pack. But that's that pack of three, those listings that show up with the map next to it on desktop device. And that's still the most valuable real estate. Even, it's time tested, and it is the most valuable real estate as it has been for the last 7 to 9 years, where consumers are making the most amount of decisions from that pack of three. And what does that mean? That means that a consumer is trying to decide, do I go with this provider or that provider or this provider? Usually from three or four choices. One of those choices could be sponsored. And so one of the things that you could do is there's lots of ways to optimize that listing. One of the latest techniques that's just now recently available to optometry, this isn't really AI, but it is driving results, is called Google Reserve. So I want every listener right now, if you have a practice, you can Google that practice. Just Google the practice name, right? ABC
Hmm.
Optometry. And I want you to see if your listing shows up. And if on that listing you have something called the Google Reserve, the Book Now button. If you don't have a Book Now button, get it. There's a couple of different places, and I can give you some links of how to get that Book Now button. It's called Google Reserve. It literally just reduces friction for patients, and the data is amazing. Because most practices don't have it yet, the practices that do have that Book Now button truly stand out. And when they stand out, what happens is patients are clicking on that button, and the actions from that Google Business Profile are increased by over 60%. And we're finding that 47% of those actions are going to that Book Now button, which is high intent patients that are looking to book an exam. They're clicking on that button, and that's really what a lot of today's optimizations are about: is providing high quality information and making it less and reducing the friction between when someone can access the information and take the action that they want to take. Does that make sense?
Yes, absolutely. And I think what you said, the option of say book now, like it's a very simple thing, but that call to action is really important to kind of encourage people to kind of go ahead and do it. Because sometimes you might just be looking and thinking what to do, and you might be having the hesitation. But if I have an opportunity to kind of lock the deal or like book it right now because I've read about the doctor, I've read about the practice, I really like it, that acts as your free salesperson who is telling you, like, let's lock the deal from an
Exactly.
internet standpoint. So I really like that suggestion, and I think it would be very useful for people listening this episode. So tell me about, like, when you talk about these practices, right? So say book now or using your presence on Google is one thing, but now we are also talking about a lot of new technologies being added into the practice. And I sometimes have this feeling that because your reimbursement as a practitioner might be pretty standard, whether you are using the best technology or not, sometimes does make you feel like, should I invest in these newer solutions, newer technology, but I really get that ROI back? So tell me a little more about how do practices do when they have all the innovations or some of the innovations that we are seeing in the industry versus those who still are using some older technologies and still are doing fine. What are your thoughts around that?
So I'll answer it in two ways, and I kind of take you down the patient journey, right? So we just talked about being found on Google, and there's probably there's more parts to that three-part formula potentially being found on Google. But let's say you're found on Google, and let's say someone tries to take action with your practice. In today's environment, what we're finding is that 50% of the patients, even if you have an online scheduling option, 50% of the patients still have questions that are unanswered before they are ready to book an appointment. Maybe it's, can you get me and my child in at the same time? Do you see kids with this particular thing? I have this particular insurance provider. Will you be able to help me fill out my reimbursement if you don't if you don't take that? Or really, like, I didn't see this appointment slot available, but like I find it more convenient to talk to someone. And so we find that 50% of the patients still call the practice. So here's a giant blind spot for practices. If you had to guess, Hukti, what percentage of the phone calls that come into practices during business hours get answered.
It's very less because you probably are always short staff and missing out those those
Right,
calls.
right. You're absolutely right. And so out of 100 phone calls, now we record millions of phone calls because, we're a marketing company that works with thousands of locations, right? So we have to know whether or not the work that we're doing generates results. So we've been recording phone calls forever. And so as we record these phone calls, one of the really concerning things, we started listening to these phone calls first with humans, and then we had those humans train AI to listen to those phone calls. And we find that, first of all, 25 out of 100 calls during business hours simply just go unanswered,
Mm.
right? So that's just money being set on fire in
Yeah.
way number one. And then when they do get answered during business hours, the staff is in a rush. The staff doesn't have a lot of focus on scheduling the appointment. They're just there to answer some questions. So if somebody calls and says, "How much is an eye exam?" The simple answer is like, "Well, it's 129, the end." Right? Like that's how
Yeah.
that conversation goes. And the person's like, "Okay, thanks. Bye." Like I'll just keep calling around. And like that patient is really fair game for somebody else who says, "Oh, well, thanks for asking. Can I ask you a little bit? I'm happy to help you with that. Can I ask you a little bit about what kind of eye exam you're looking for? Tell me about what I can help you with." And the second
Yeah.
that somebody engages them, their eye exam might be 149, but if they explain to you that that eye exam fits more closely with the needs of that particular patient, that patient will be like, "Oh, okay, yeah, I don't know, like I guess price shouldn't be my only decision driver. This practice seems like they care about me." So when we do answer those phone calls, this is another data point. When we do answer those phone calls, the phone capture rate across new patients is so bad. It's so low. It's like 17% right now for patients that could be appointment opportunities that actually turn into appointments if they're new to the practice. And you might also think, well, at least we're capturing 100% of the people who are past patients who are calling to schedule an appointment. And the answer is no, we're not. We're
Mm.
still turning away more than 20% of those people. Like, I was a past patient. I'm calling you to make an appointment. And somehow, yeah, 2 out of 10 times, I just hang up the phone without an appointment,
Yeah.
which is ridiculous, right? So this is the first innovation I wanna to answer your question, the first innovation I really encourage everybody to invest in because it's a giant ROI positive bucket of money that's probably currently on fire in at least in most of the practices in the United States. And the first innovation I encourage people to invest in is tools that help drive capture rate on the phone,
Mm.
right? We all know our capture rate in the optical, but
Yeah.
very, very few practices are aware of even having the blind spot of capture rate on the phone. So there's AI tools, which is an innovation that listens to those calls. There are tools that are coming out that answer those calls for you and help schedule an exam, which drives revenue, reduces cost, and improves the patient experience because the patient wants to schedule an appointment. This just helps them do it. So these are like AI and innovations that are I guess like they're in the practice, but they're sort of on the brink of like coming into the
Mm.
practice. I would say a patient will be way more impressed and way more excited to come into the practice if you first answer the phone when they call, and two, help them find an appointment that's convenient for them and answer the questions in a way that ultimately drives them to be comfortable to schedule that appointment. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you did highlight some really great points about creating value. Like, sometimes we are so focused on providing like a cheap eye care, like say providing an eye exam for 129 versus someone who's 149. But what does that value mean for the patient? That 129 would mean nothing to someone who doesn't even understand what you're offering. But 149, even though it's more, you might be doing exactly same, but the way it is presented, the way, the information is shared, as you rightly mentioned from the start, the way we are communicating with the patient might feel that there's this more value for my time and there's more convenience versus someone is like, no, I don't think so. I can connect with that practice, with that doctor, with that staff who answered the call and probably didn't help me, schedule an appointment.
Well, and that's it, right? Like there's this whole concept of what is the decision criteria by which a consumer makes a decision,
Yeah.
right? So if you think about this, if you're going to go order a pizza and you've really not had pizza before, and this is the first time that you're ordering a pizza, well, maybe you'll look at some online reviews, right? Maybe you decide, oh, this pizza place has, but assuming that they're pretty equal,
Yeah.
you might call this place and say, how much is a pizza? And they might be like $20. And you might call this place and say, how much is a pizza? And they might be like $15. And you say, okay, well, my decision criteria is the only decision criteria that is most familiar to me, which is the money, right?
Yeah.
So I'll just go with the $15 pizza because I want to try pizza and this one's 15, this one's 20. I don't know
Yeah.
what the other differences are. And the same is true for eye care. The patient doesn't have the information they need outside of the criteria that they're familiar with, which is money.
Yeah.
That's true for most services. So it is our responsibility as and I think about our responsibility as business strategists who communicate to patients on behalf of our clients, but also it's our responsibility as practice owners to educate the patients that there is a discernible difference between a $27 eye exam and a $200 eye exam. And it's our responsibility to make sure that they understand how that more closely aligns with their ultimate goals and ultimate needs, if it certainly does.
Yeah, no, I agree. And then you did talk about like, one of the technology that someone should definitely invest in. And there are a lot more technologies that I'm sure like, we can have an endless list and another probably episode talking about technologies people can
Right.
invest in. But I want to talk about the fact that how do you envision the future of optometry and eye care practice? Because you've seen the shift, you've seen how people are, investing in technology. You suggested like, there is still a huge gap people are missing out and not thinking about. You might have a social media page where you're doing everything and having adding followers, but you're not answering the phone. So which is your direct ROI. So I think those are some very important nuggets that you shared. But what does the future of optometry looks like? Do you feel it will be taken by AI and we would not have our jobs, which I know is a controversial topic that we always hear? Or how do you see what's going to happen in the future?
I think, and I'm not the first person to say this, but of course, the optometrists that are using as much technology as possible, including AI, will ultimately outpace and outperform and outmaneuver the optometrists who are not using the technology available to them. And that's, when you think about all of the technology that is starting to become available now, it's everything that happens pre-appointment. It's everything that happens during the appointment that ultimately impacts the patient experience, that ultimately makes that patient feel like that appointment was not a transaction but a true point of care and a true opportunity to really like, okay, I do want, even if we didn't find anything, I do want that imaging and I do want that AI interpretation of that imaging and I do want to keep track of it every single year. Or I do want that dry eye treatment plan because this doctor did find this special thing, right? Like if you kind of think about all of the things that could be happening during the eye exam to make that experience truly impressive, technology is a huge, huge part of that.
Yeah.
And then you go after the exam as well. And if you can customize the communication to demonstrate to the patient that number one, you're an expert, number two, that you care about their outcomes, and number three, that it is something that you feel is super important is to have them back. If you can leverage technology, because previously it was really hard to do that, right? When I started in this industry, it was a miracle if somebody was like recalling patients. And when we say recalling patients, call was the thing. Like we had call lists and people would dial the phone and tell people, hey, it's time for your eye exam, right?
Yeah.
And now there's all kinds of technology that can do that, but there's still few technologies that ultimately do the testing and to figure out exactly how to maximize that patient out communication opportunity. But I guess my point is that the future of optometry, I think, is bright because, as you said before, everyone's going to need an eye exam, and at some point in their lives. But if you look at the data tells a very cautionary tale because Vision Council had some data that they published earlier this year that says, look, we're doing more exams as an industry, but we're getting paid less
Mm.
per exam as providers. And there's amazing, I mean, that we probably talk about that data for a half an hour, but the point is that patients are coming in, but they're not spending as much money with us as they used to because again we're making it too transactional and we're not making it necessarily about leveraging all of our tools to communicate all of our value, because if we're having more patients come in rather than try to be faster and less personal in the exam room, let's use the technology to make us faster and more personal in the exam room. And that ability to see more patients but communicate more value to every single patient, it's that opportunity is available to every single person in the industry right now. So my really, I guess it's kind of a strong. I'm pleading to the industry is like adopt the technology, because the more you use the technology and the tools that are available to you now, whether it's the phone capture rate stuff that I talked about earlier, whether it's the stuff that can make your exams a much more personal and special and impressive experience to the patient, or whether it's the post exam follow up tools that ultimately personalize that experience, drive referrals, drive second pair sales or third pair sales in some cases. There's like all kinds of stuff that's available to help maximize every patient interaction. And remember, when patients spend money with you, they don't dislike you for it. They appreciate the service that you're providing, and they're more likely to come back and tell their friends and refer others. So it's really an opportunity for growth in the industry.
Absolutely. And I really agree with the fact that if you can provide value, they would love it, even if they're spending more at your practice versus others. And just to add and build on, what you talk about adding more technology, I think as we all are aware about, we also need to think about eye care beyond eye care is what I have started kind of talking about recently with the whole concept of oculomics and how eye care can go beyond just an eye exam. I think that can also feel that your patients might feel that, okay, you know what, you are staying on top of the latest technology. When I come for an eye exam, now I also get to know that I need to see a diabetologist if you see any changes for diabetic retinopathy. You always did that, but now you can provide some educational material to the patient. Now you can provide them material that they can track and they can control their health, which I feel has become the new trend in terms of the shift on the patient behavior, where they want to be more involved. They want to be part of the decision making and the journey versus just depending on, yeah, doctor, here I am, take care of everything, right? So I think the more you involve the patient into their entire healthcare journey, the better you become as a practice. And, that's the experience which I feel the patients are looking for now.
Yeah, and look, dude, you and I both spend enough time behind the podium that we know that when we look at the exciting future, it's the, oh my gosh, there's so many people investing in wearable tech. There's and it's prime for the optometrist to be at the head of that table.
Yeah.
And not, as a friend of mine who's in the industry likes to say, you can be at the table, but you can be on the menu, or you can be at the
Yep.
table, right?
Yep.
So
Yep.
we don't want to be eaten alive because a big companies like Amazon and Meta and Google came in and kind of took over the industry. But the reality is that wearable technology is definitely a big part of the future of optometry and the oculomics as it evolves in that, because all that wearable technology has sensors. But let me just go back to the basics. Like, can we just answer the phone when it rings in the practice?
Yeah.
Like, that would be great for the patient experience if we could just answer the phone those 2.5 times out of 10 that it's going to voicemail.
Yeah.
And if we just do that, then we'll be ready for the next innovation, and then the next innovation, and the next innovation. And it's great to keep an eye on the future, but the technology is available now to where
Mhm.
you really don't have an excuse to be providing a subpar patient experience for the stuff that they're coming in for right now. And if you could just do that well, and then you're ready to innovate beyond that, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's great that that you suggested to go back to basics, because sometimes with so much of technology around you, you might get tempted to add a lot of things as a practice owner, but miss out on the basics that can directly impact your ROI, which as a strategist, I'm glad that you're bringing back that attention to it. And I think that's where your experience and expertise talk. Let's talk about the future and technology once you are able to answer the call and secure that patient at the first as the first step in their journey. I think this has been a very interesting episode, and we did talk a lot about the gaps, what we can do, what is the future, what is the shift. But I want to move to our game segment, which is more focused on knowing you as a person versus anything optometry. So we're just going to dive into a simple game called This or That, where I'll give you two options. You just have to pick the one that you like the most, and that will let me know a little more about you as a person versus anything to do with work you do. So are you ready for it?
Let's do it.
All right. Are you a dog person or a cat person?
Dog.
All right. Phone call or text?
Uh, phone call.
All right. Glasses or contact lenses?
Glasses.
Hmm. Online shopping or shopping in store?
Online.
Online. All right. Cake or ice cream?
Ice cream cake.
Ice cream cake. Ah, that's smart. Oceans or mountains?
Oceans.
All right. And movie or reading?
Reading.
All right, that's it. I think I definitely know a lot more about you. I'll definitely give you a call, and I know, like, next time we meet, we're going to have an ice cream cake just to celebrate all the conversations that we've had. With that,
What
I
I want
think,
you to do, okay, take all of the responses that you've gotten from all of your guests and to map personality types. And like my data driven brain just cannot stop thinking about the massive amounts of intelligence you can gather from those questions as indicators of like personality profiles and likely to do this or that in the world. Like that would be amazing if you could, and then you could ask kids that question in school, and then you could have predictive intelligence that helps them succeed in the future. Anyway, that's
oh my
how
God, that's actually brilliant. I never thought about it. See, that's the benefit of having a strategist and a growth person as your friend who can always think about, like, hey, you have this data, use it in certain ways. So I'm so glad that we are friends now, and I'm going to use more of your data brain to help me grow. For anyone, who's listening to this episode, Eugene is a person you want to have on your LinkedIn list and you want to be friends with. So definitely reach out to him for anything and everything you want to learn about growth strategy and just in general for any idea that you might have. It doesn't have to be very optometry related, but in general, if you're trying to do something new, he's definitely a person you want to kind of share your thoughts with, and his data driven brain will give you great strategies that you haven't thought about as you saw it live. With that, I think I would like to wrap up my episode with one takeaway message that you would have for all my listeners.
I think it is you have to adopt the technology that's available now. And if you're not aware of it, just take the time, take half an hour, 20 minutes a week, and just make yourself familiar with all of the technology opportunities now. As I said before, in 2007 or so, the relationship with information that humanity had changed because we had this addition of the device. We made information accessible and convenient. At this point, we're going through this other change right now. We're in the midst of it, and so it's kind of like if a practice is sitting here before the internet is like, well, I don't know if this internet thing is going to be a fad or if it's going to help me or not. It's like, no, you just can't let it pass you by. You have to take time to learn about the technology that's available. Again, 15 to 30 minutes a week max, and then start trying to adopt some of these things. They're a lot easier than most people think to start trying testing out in your business, and then make the decision based on the data. I think that's where I just want people to be aware, and my big push for the industry is please take the time to learn about the stuff that's available and can help you and can impress your patients and can help your practice grow.
I love that. And as I think that's really nice that it is overwhelming. There's a lot of things out there, but spending 20 minutes a week is definitely doable. So with that, thank you once again, Eugene, for your time. I'll be dropping the links for his LinkedIn profile also, like what he does. So do check it out. And thank you once again for all your time and your insights. It's been a true pleasure.
It's a pleasure, Uti. Thank you so much for having me.